then I can
Perfect.
help her catch her up too.
Okay, so I'll start the recording. Now, the first thing that we had on the list that was sent over by Terry was the bank reconciliation. Okay, so the bank reconciliation, you're going to find that functionality under the accounting section here, and we're going to pull up that bank rec section. Now, when we first go in there, for you guys at least, since you're coming out of migration next Monday, you're not going to see anything here in this section when you first come in to start the bank rec. So you're going to start your first one, and there's a couple things to kind of keep in mind when you're starting the bank rec, especially the first one. It's very important. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to come in and we're going to start the bank rec on the left-hand side by clicking on Reconcile Account. We're going to pull up that button there. We're going to click on it, and we're going to see this pop up here, and it's going to ask us a couple different things. So first off, most importantly, is the bank account that we're going to be reconciling. So you'll find your operating account. If you guys have a different escrow or security deposit account, you can reconcile that as well. But I'll find my operating account, or the account that I'm reconciling, and you'll notice, let me actually select one of these other ones just for this example.
Can
You'll
I stop
notice,
you for one quick second?
yeah, go ahead.
Um, Now, when I log in, since I have access to all the properties, well, right now
Yes.
we only have the one in there, but we're going to have more.
Okay.
When I log in, and like I just saw that you said this said property one and property two,
Mm-hmm.
so like I'm going to have access to like all the properties at once,
Yes.
or do I have to ever like log into a specific property in order to do something like,
No, no.
um,
So that's a great question, Shannon. And what's going to happen is you'll actually log in to the system just with your one login, and you'll have access to all of the properties. So you don't need to log into different ones. Everything that you'll do, because you have permissions to all of the properties, you'll always see multiple options in these drop downs. You'll see bank accounts for all the properties, things like that. Does that make sense?
it does. So like
Okay.
if I'm doing a journal entry or anything else, every time I'm going to be picking the property that I'm applying it to.
Yes, yes, you'll be picking properties and things like that.
Okay, hold on one
Okay.
second. All right.
Perfect.
Okay, go ahead.
Alrighty, so the other thing that we'll need to be aware of here in this section that's really important when we're starting the first bank rec is going to be this beginning date. Now, I'm sure you're aware you probably helped prepare all of the financial information for the migration, but when you sent that information over, the info runs through a specific date, right? It might have been the 10th, it might have been the 7th of March, whatever that last day of data was. When you come in to start the first bank rec, you're going to want to make sure that the beginning date is the day after the data cutoff. So if we sent over, if you gave us here at Entrada information through maybe the 4th of March, we'll want to start the bank rec as of the 5th of the month, going through to the last day on the statement or your bank statement for that month. So keep that in mind because that
How
information,
would
what was that?
how would I know?
It's now in the reporting that you sent us, it's going to have a date on there. And I can probably just double check with your project manager or your Entrada Core consultant. Who have you been talking to over in the consulting department?
Well, Zach is our
Zach,
main contact, and
yeah.
Sarah's like our migrating contact.
Is that Sarah Lenchuk?
Yes.
Okay, so you can either ask Sarah or you can reach out to Zach and he can get you that information as well. Okay.
Okay,
All right.
I'll ask Sarah
All
then.
righty. Perfect. And then the other thing that we'll do then is we'll reconcile through to whatever that bank statement shows us. And we're going to show the beginning balance as well as the ending balance again that's on that statement. Now, I am going to just enter in some numbers in here. Nothing's going to really match up for this example in my test account. But when we continue, we'll be able to pull in any transactions in this section. that we have recorded within Entrada for the period. So all of the information for this dark period that you have been holding on to, you're going to want to do the data catch up when you come out of migration next Tuesday, and all of those transactions will appear in the bank rec when you perform it, early in April for the month of March. Now, I know this doesn't show anything right now. I don't have anything showing for my operating account for my second property. So I'm going to go back into my original one. I just wanted to show you the fields that are going to show up there as far as the start date, because that only ever shows for the first bank rec. Moving forward, the start date of the bank reconciliation is the day after, is 1 day from the end date for the previous one. So let's open up just one of these bank recs here that I know I'm going to have some data for, and we'll reconcile through maybe the end of February or something. And I'll show you what we're going to see here in this section. Now, we'll pull in all of the transactions into the bank rec that are going to hit that cash account. So any checks that are paid through the AP module, any deposits that are made that affect the cash account, and any journal entries that are recorded as well will show in this section. So you'll be able to see all of those items. And I'm sure in Yardi and all of these other systems that you've used, you've done something similar when it comes to reconciling the account. From here, all we're going to do is we're going to go through and start checking off all of the items that actually cleared the account for that specific period. That portion of it is not, is going to be the same. The big thing to keep in mind is just when we're first initiating the bank rec, those dates will matter, especially for that initial bank rec that we're going to start within the system. So keep that in mind. Now, the goal for the bank rec, just like with any of these other systems, is we want to make sure that the totals here on the right-hand side, as far as the difference goes, shows a zero difference after we've gone through and cleared all of the items for that period. If you're starting the first bank rec and you're noticing that you still have a difference in here. Oh. I don't think that was on my end, but hey, Terry, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, okay. No worries.
Gio,
Yeah.
I'm going to switch over to her office real quick.
Yeah, no, go ahead. So Terry, we were just starting. We were starting the bank rec, and
Okay.
I've recorded this session so that you don't miss anything. I'll provide the recording afterwards. Okay.
Great. Thank
Perfect.
you. Shayna's coming over.
Yeah, totally.
Can you hear us?
I can hear you.
I put you on speaker. It's just that we're in an office that has no carpeting, and so
No, yeah, no worries. You guys are fine. Let me know when you're ready.
Okay, we're ready.
Okay, perfect. So as I was mentioning, we're going to want to have a zero difference here on the right-hand side. And what I was going to say is when you're starting this initial bank rec, I know with the data catch-up, with things like that, especially with the migration dates, if you're having a problem with that initial bank rec getting this difference to zero, we're going to want to, you can reach back out to us here at Entrada, and our accounting consulting team is able to provide additional assistance with the first initial bank rec and some follow-up assistance if you guys have any additional questions when you're starting out. Unfortunately, with this test database, I can't go through and complete one and like match everything up because there's a lot of junk data in here. But when you start doing all the data catch-up in your live account, and come April you start on the bank reconciliation, if you have any questions whatsoever, please reach back out to us, and our accounting consultant team can provide any additional assistance as well. So if you're having any problems with getting that reconciled and seeing that zero difference in that section. Now within the bank
and that's all part of our, that's all included in our whole setup cost.
Yeah. So that's part of like the service agreement, especially with the initial migration. You guys have the first little while, the first couple of months to, you have access to the Entrada core consulting and accounting team to, and they can answer any additional questions and things like that. So that's part of it.
Good to know.
Okay. And I know, our clients love that, and having that the access to those teams. So that is a benefit that you have with the migration. Alrighty, guys. Now, within the bank rec itself, there's going to be some additional items that we'll be able to kind of be on the lookout for. Now, in the very top right, if we ever need to pause the bank rec and come back at a later point in time, some of our clients like to come in here daily, and as transactions occur, they'll come in and clear them out. You can pause it, save your progress, and come back if you'd like to. If I want to import, for example, let's say come April, I'm doing the bank rec for March, I can download a file of all the cleared checks from my bank account, and we can actually import that file into Entrata. And when we import that CSV file that you download from your bank website, we'll be able to mark all of the items that match up within the bank reconciliation. We'll mark those as cleared, and we'll save you the trouble of having to go through and checking off all of the individual items. So if that's something that you would like to use, you definitely can. The standard and the format of those files from bank to bank is generally the same. So you can just download the file, import it, and if there's any sort of error, we'll go ahead and let you know. But generally, that tool, there's no issues that you really need to be on the lookout for. Now, one of the other items that you'll see here in the top right is going to be the reconciling item. Have you guys, during the course of the consultation or anything like that, have you guys talked about reconciling items within Entrata?
We've only seen it, it showed up as a default account on our income statement that we can't remove.
Okay, the reconciling item. Okay,
so.
All right, we'll take a look at that here in just a little bit, but that reconciling item is a function that lives, and it's supposed to really only reside within the bank reconciliation itself. And it's a tool that we provide in Entrata when you have to account for transactions that show up in your bank statement for, let's say, the month of February, if that's the one that we're doing right now, but weren't recorded in Entrata until the following month, right? So it actually happened and cleared the bank account in February for whatever reason. We didn't record it until March 2nd, March 5th. By then, the transaction was already, or the period was already closed. If that's ever the case, you can add what's called the reconciling item. Now, those items don't actually hit the GL account. It's just so that we can get these ending balances and the difference to show zero within the actual bank rec. Now, it's again to account for those timing differences, but you would click on that link there, and we would add in all of the information for that. So the transaction, when it actually hit, we would add a date within the bank rec period that we're reconciling for. We would add an amount for that specific reconciling item. If it's a check that was paid, we would add a negative. If it was a deposit, we would go ahead and add a positive number in this section. We can go ahead and add a description and then any additional reference numbers if we need to. Now, within this section here, you'll see this last little item or this little toggle down at the bottom. In the initial item, what we're going to do is with the data catch-up, the migration, I know that you guys are currently in that dark period. Any items that cleared the account during this dark period or that transactions that occurred that are going to hit the cash account for this period, we'll want to add them in here and we'll mark them as initial items. And what that's going to do is it'll leave that transaction hanging out kind of in the bank rec until it actually clears the account, whether it's in this period that we're reconciling for, or if it hits it, maybe it was a transaction more towards the end of the month, we'll be able to clear it out sometime in April if that's the case, for example. So you can add the reconciling items in here. There's some additional documentation and some additional notes that I'm going to provide to you guys. We have a guide that includes a lot of detailed information concerning the first bank rec. At the end of this call, I'll share that with you guys, and it'll include some additional notes concerning these specific items in case you want to read up on those some more and see some additional info. Now, the other things that we'll be able to do here is we'll be able to add any additional journal entries. Maybe if we were missing a transaction, some sort of cash transfer, whatever that may be, we can record it directly from here without having to leave the bank rec and navigate over to the journal entries module. And then the last and final thing that we can do is we can attach a file and we'll be able to maybe attach a copy of that bank statement, whatever we need to do, any sort of record or documentation that we need for the bank rec itself. We can attach the file, and that'll be tied always to the bank rec, and that file will be saved here within the rec for you. Now, based on the previous tools that you have used, is this pretty similar to some of those other tools that you've seen before?
Within Entrada?
Well, maybe in some of the other systems and things like that. Is the layout I mean, is it pretty straightforward? Are there going to be, any things that you guys have questions on, that you feel like might come up or anything like that?
It looks straightforward. I mean, to tell you the truth, I've never done a bank rec inside of a system ever.
Okay.
No, I have. It seems fine to me. The only thing that I think is kind of wacky is when you have those reconciling items where something hit cash and it's not in your system.
Okay. And that's, you know what, I get that every single time, and I totally understand. So, like I said, those notes I think will be, generally the layout is the same, and if you've done one in a system before, it's pretty straightforward. But we'll provide those notes. I know questions are probably going to come up about the reconciling items. I'll provide those, and you'll have some additional reference there for when the time comes, okay?
Okay.
Perfect.
Yeah. When you're adding a reconciling item, like your example of a deposit that hasn't hit the bank account but isn't recorded until the following month.
Right.
Are you able to look at the following month's GL and pull that in as a reconciling item?
So you would be able to see it in the period that it was recorded in the system. So if you were to pull reporting, like if I were to run the GL details report or anything like that, I would be able to see it in the period it was recorded in Entrada. The reconciling items won't necessarily show up as any sort of transaction on the GL because they don't actually hit the general ledger.
Okay, actually, what I mean is like while I'm in the bank rec section and I want to add a reconciling item, will it allow me to see like next month's deposits to add that as my reconciling item, or I just have to enter in the amount?
So no, you'll enter in the amount. It's not going to show any like future month details or anything like that. No, it's not going to do that.
Okay.
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 Alrighty, perfect. Now I'll provide those notes, and again, when the time comes to do the first bank rec in here, I'm pretty sure you might have a question or two that come up, especially with any of the data catch-up or the dark period data. Please feel free to reach back out. Like I said, there's some resources that are available, and we won't really know kind of what's going to come up until you begin the first bank rec. So, please feel free to reach out at that point in time, and we can provide additional assistance. All right.
Do you post bank fees and interest income through the bank rec, or do you have to do that by journal entry?
You can do it by journal entry through the bank rec, or you can go straight to the accounting journal entry section. Either way is going to work. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Perfect. Now, one of the other questions that had come up here, Terry, or that you had sent over in your email was related, I'm just kind of going down the list, was related to asset tracking within Entrada. Now, the asset tracking portion of it, so I was looking at your setup, and there's two options. So we do the inventory tracking, and then we track the fixed assets as well, with depreciation and all that stuff. Are you guys, I saw that the fixed assets portion of it was not enabled. Is that what you guys were looking to do?
Yes.
Okay.
No, we want fixed assets enabled so that
Okay, so
we want fixed assets enabled.
Okay, you do want it enabled. Okay.
Yes. No, he was saying it wasn't enabled and he thought wanted to make
Oh, no.
We want it enabled.
Okay, I wanted to double check because I did notice that it wasn't. So what I'll do is I'll send over an email to Zach after this call. And I know you guys are in migration right now, so I know the setup isn't fully finalized yet as far as the settings go. If I don't see that switch over by next Monday or Tuesday, we'll go ahead and make sure that that is enabled, okay? Now, the asset tracking portion of it, there's two pieces to it. So first, we need to go into the setup of asset tracking and make sure that on the back end, all the settings and the setup is correct. And that's going to happen under the setup and financial section within Entrada, or setup company section within Entrada. So we'll go setup company. And under setup company, we'll head over to the financial tab. And from here, we're going to head over to the asset tracking section. Now, in asset tracking, you'll notice we have the catalog inventory item management here, and then we have the fixed assets section. This is the section that I didn't see that you guys had enabled. It currently says no, but again, we'll be on the lookout for that and make sure that that gets turned on for you guys. Now, with the setup of these items, you'll notice depending on the section that we're in, once we have that enabled, we'll be able to do a couple different things. Now, if I want to set, in order to be able to use the inventory tracking and the catalog items, we'll want to make sure that we're adding those items within each of these categories so that our users or whoever's in charge of adding purchase orders, invoices, is able to select from a list of items that are preset when they go to create those payables, the POs, the invoices, things like that. Now, creating the items is pretty straightforward. Once we have it enabled, we can click Add Catalog Item.
Oh, time out.
Yeah.
Time out. Now, when they're entering in to get the PO, they have to be able to select from the items and not from an account number?
So yeah, so that's one of the things with the inventory tracking, is that they'll select from a list of items versus an actual GL account number. Is that what you guys were looking to do?
Well, when we were going through the setup questions on our call the other day, they'd asked, do we want it set up by them picking from categories or picking from account numbers, and we chose account numbers.
Yeah, because they made it sound like you had to pick the vendor or something. It was like
by vendor.
Like it was by vendor and not by category.
By no.
Vendor had like
each
items
vendor
set up under them.
You know what? As far as being assigned to a specific vendor, I'm pretty sure that it's not set up that way. For example, if we look at, well, we do actually. So for example, we do have the vendor down here at the bottom. So I could associate the actual item under that vendor, and it'll only appear if that vendor is selected when we're creating the purchase order or the invoice. Is that kind of what you're looking for, or are you still wanting to allow people to use the account number?
So I don't think we really, true answers, I don't think we know.
Okay.
What we were hoping to do was, it was our understanding that using this asset tracking system, it would allow us to put things like serial numbers in there and warranty information and things of that nature.
Okay.
And when we were having our call earlier this week, they made it seem like if we turned this on, then we didn't have the ability to create a PO by account number as well. Was that it was an either-or situation?
So that's the thing.
What was driving the asset tracking was the vendor, and we thought, well, we could have multiple vendors for different categories, but we don't know, we're just getting started, so we don't even know who the vendors are yet.
Yeah. No, I agree.
And each vendor can have several categories.
Right, and each vendor could have several categories, so we were like, well, we don't want to necessarily be limited to categories. So is it an either or can you do both?
Actually, from my understanding, and if that's what they were telling you, it is an either or. So we either search by GL account, or we select from a list of items in that drop down, and I'll show you what that looks like. So just to kind of maybe give you a little more context, but let's disable this. Let's just disable catalog items for now, and I'll show you what the PL is going to look like. Let's see here. If anything, we can do a little bit of testing, but what we'll see is under then accounting and purchase orders, when I go to create a PO or an invoice, you'll notice on in that.
Gio?
Yeah. Hello? Hey, can you guys hear me?
Hello?
Hey, can you hear me?
Gio? No, you're like a robot.
Hey, Marco, are you there, dude? Hey, Terry or Terry, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Okay, good.
Okay, Terry, can you guys hear me now?
Hear you.
Okay, I'm not sure what was going on. My internet was being my internet was being kind of slow, so I think that might have been it. But okay, so what we'll do, I just disabled the asset tracking, right? So let's take a look at adding a purchase order. Now you'll notice here in this section, without it enabled, it doesn't matter what vendor I select. I can come in here and select whoever, but I'm still going to require my users to come in, and once we select one of these properties, we're going to either use the default GL account associated to that vendor, or we're going to have to select from a list of the GL accounts and make sure that we're selecting the correct expense account. So that's the way that it'll work without the asset tracking enabled. If I were to go back into this section and we enable the item catalog, and we can even do receiving as well. But if we enable that, when I go back into the PO window, if I add a purchase order, it's now going to require me to grab, for example, when I select a property, I now have to select by catalog item. So it is an either or situation. You can't do one or the other. Does that?
Let me ask you this: when you have the drop down set up on the other side, purchase order side, is there a way to limit what categories the property can pull from? In other words, they don't need to see the balance sheet; they need to be focused on the expense side.
Right. So that's actually.
Is there a way?
Yeah, no, I'm glad you asked that question, because there is. Now, in the next couple of what do you call it? In the next couple of days, so on the 17th, we're going to be releasing some functionality that that allows you to restrict posting to certain GL accounts. We could go ahead and restrict posting for property managers and assistant managers and things like that, so that they only see the expense accounts. They won't even see or be able to select the balance sheet accounts. So that is something that we could do as of March 17th. So next week we'll be able to enable those settings.
Beautiful. I love that.
I know, and people have been asking for that for a while, so we're finally releasing it to everybody. That is something that's coming now. That reminds me now, and it actually brings something up. Now, even if we do the catalog items and we enable asset tracking along with that release, we're also going to see something that I think might resolve the question of being limited to the either or situation in this case, and I just now thought of it. We're going to see now, if we have catalog items enabled or if we have asset tracking enabled, when we go to create a PO, we're actually going to see a drop down that is going to allow us to select from a standard or a catalog PO, so that we can now have the flexibility to go back and forth between selecting from the items or selecting just from the GL account numbers. So that is also something that is coming next week. It's not out yet, but that actually answers that question. If you want to have both enabled, you can, or if you want to allow just the account selection, then you can do that as well.
That's great.
Okay, so you'll have,
asset tracking will work.
And asset tracking will work, yeah. So we won't be limited to the either or situation. Just keep that in mind. Again, that'll be coming March 17th, next Thursday. So you'll have some more options there when that happens. Okay.
Also, like, let's say like something came through that wasn't through like our AP module.
Mm-hmm.
But say we did something on the outside and we did a journal entry to record it. Yeah. Can we add that to our inventory or our fixed asset list by a journal entry?
So what we could do now, I'll be honest with you, I'm not 100% sure on that one. If we have, let me re-enable this. I think I already did, and we'll take a look. if we re-enable that, I did see an option earlier to enable, let's go back into POs here. So we can go into the asset list and we should be able to adjust, or we can add that fixed asset manually. It doesn't necessarily have to come through the PO, it looks like. So let me take a look here. I'll just double check for you. Okay, so yeah, we're able to add that if it doesn't come through a purchase order or to the AP system. You are able to adjust it.
So this is just going to add it to our schedule and not do anything to our GL.
Well, if you notice here, let me double check something really quick. Yeah, no, so it looks like if we were to add it this way, I don't necessarily think that it's going to do anything on the GL. It would be kind of a two-step process. You would have to record it through a journal entry, and then we would have to adjust the inventory manually. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yep.
Okay.
Well, no,
that's good to know.
Yeah, this is good because we're going to have a starting basis that we already have fixed assets in place when we take over. So we'll be able to add them to our list.
Plus, I'm doing a costing study.
Right.
So that's going to be huge to be able to do that.
Perfect. Awesome. Alrighty. Now within that section, then, as far as enabling, catalog items and things like that, let me just go back real quick into the setup section, and under the catalog items, if that is something that that we're going to be enabling, when we add the items, there's going to be a couple details in here that you'll need to be just kind of aware of. And I'm sure you guys might have seen this before in other systems, but we're going to select the type of item that we're adding. And that's going to be, it's going to fall under a couple different items, or a couple different types here in this dropdown. So we'll do a fixed asset. We can do a fixed asset that's non-depreciable. We can do inventory, and we have some other options in there like non-inventory and services. But the two big ones that I've seen used are these first three, primarily fixed asset and inventory. Now, I'm going to come in here and add the item type as inventory. I'm going to add the name for that item. Again, that's going to be whatever it is that you guys are keeping track of: maintenance supplies, light bulbs, all of that stuff. And then what we're going to do is we can add any additional information. Maybe we use a specific model number, item number. We can add any additional details in the description. But we'll go through and we'll add, for example, let me just do a quick one here. We'll do just a quick description, and we'll be able to come down and select a unit of measure. So we'll say maybe each, and we could do a category. We could do maybe electrical or other supplies here from this drop down. We would probably do lighting. And then we'll select the asset account, the GL account that we're going to be tying all of this inventory to and recording it under. And then we'll select the expense account as well when we're buying these or purchasing these items here within this section, so that we know what account to adjust. So we'll come in and we'll select this info. Let me remember here what one of these accounts was, one of the better options that I had. We'll just go ahead and add it under one of these general ones here just for now. And then we'll come down, we'll add a default unit cost, and that'll update the PO depending on the number of items that we're purchasing automatically. It'll just assign it to the PO, and then we'll enable that. Now, if we want to associate it to a specific vendor, we can. We'll click, you don't have to though, we'll click add, and that item will now fall or be listed under that specific category. And we can go through now. If we were to go into the purchase orders, I'll be able to select that item from that drop down if that's the kind of PO that I'm going to be adding, if it's going to be a catalog PO. So the setup of it, pretty straightforward. All of the GL accounts, as far as the asset and expense accounts, that stuff you guys provided to us as part of the migration. Do you guys, was all of that information, I assume everything was up to date, you had all of the information in there that you're gonna need. If you need to make any changes to it, you are able to by editing out the general ledger or the chart of accounts, as you would call it, within Entrada. And that kind of leads us into the question of how we create GL accounts within the system. Now, that's going to be found under, what was that?
You were just giving us like an example of like inventory. So, you know, we went and bought $1,000 of inventory and we recorded it to our asset account. Now, how do we deplete that inventory? How do we say we've used $100 worth of our inventory this month?
Okay, so that's a great question. Now, what we're going to do is when we're actually, let's go back into that asset or that inventory list. Let me go back into the accounting section. We'll go into the inventory, for example, and let's say that I think I have like 20 light bulbs on hand. So what we'll do is we'll be able to open up, let me take a look here at this item info on order. For something like inventory like this, I believe that's going to be tied to the maintenance request. Let me take a look here.
Now, when inventory, does it have to be by unit or can it be by dollar?
With inventory? Now,
yes.
we'll if we have that dollar value assigned, if we were to run a report for that information, you'll actually see it with both values. You'll see it by the number that we have on hand, and then there's going to be a total dollar value. Okay. Does that help answer your question, or?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. All right, let me go ahead and take a look at, I'm going to just create one of these guest cards here really quick. Not a guest card, a maintenance request. Now with the fixed assets, not with the inventory tracking, but with the actual fixed assets, so some of maybe those larger items like the refrigerators and things like that, that's going to be used up once it's placed in service. So once we assign it to a specific apartment or you know, anything like that, then at that point we'll start based on the formula for depreciation for whatever category that asset falls under. That's going to start being depleted. I'm going to have to take a look real quick, maybe after this phone call, at the specific inventory section. I'm pretty sure that it's tied into this work order, but I'm going to have to double check. With the fixed assets, what's going to happen is we'll be able to open up this assets list. And if I were to go to any one of these furniture or one of these refrigerators, for example, let's say that's one of the assets that I have on hand, I can open up that asset, and on the right-hand side, we're going to see this. It's now grayed out because I've assigned both of the items that I have, but we'll see this place in service button that's going to allow me to assign that to a specific location or apartment. At that point, that item starts getting depleted based on the depreciation schedule that we have set up in this fixed assets section. And it'll go off of, you know, the default useful life. It'll calculate what the depreciation is going to be per month, and it'll start reporting wise, we'll start keeping track of that information. That's for the fixed assets. I'm going to have to take a look at the inventory side. I might have to give you guys a call back after this webinar to kind of go over that process. Is that okay?
Oh, yeah.
Perfect. As far as the fixed asset side, though, and placing the item in service, does that make sense? Does that, you know, as far as depreciating the item and then retiring the asset at the end of its useful life?
That's awesome.
It's pretty neat. I mean, I don't know. I'm not as familiar with some of these other, you know, other systems like Yardi and things like that. Do they have something like that within their system?
No.
Okay, so this is brand new.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. So we'll keep track of that info now. Just to kind of give you an idea, I know the question was brought up earlier. Within the reporting section, we'll be able to see under the accounting section, we'll be able to see those reports related to asset tracking or asset management. And this is where we would be able to come in and see, for example, the number of items that we have on hand. So if I were to do asset tracking, I can run that report for Alpha Apartments, which is my test property. I have one fixed asset that I've added to my account, but we'll generate the report and it'll go ahead and give us just a count. If I need to see a dollar value, I can open up the asset valuation report and that'll give me a dollar value for all of the assets that I have on hand. If I have assets that have depreciated, and at this point in time, it hasn't calculated any for me because I just placed these assets in service this period. But if I were to say, as of next post month, what is the value of those assets going to be, it's going to start calculating that depreciation and you'll be able to see a total dollar value. So we'll just have to make sure that we're going into that reporting section and running it, running each report, one for a unit count, one for a dollar value amount, but you will be able to see that information in this reporting section, again, under the reports and accounting section. I'll take a look though at the inventory side. I'm gonna have to play around with it a little bit. I know it's tied to the maintenance side of it, but we'll take a look at it and I can follow up with you guys and provide some additional info as far as depleting those items on the inventory side, okay?
So if you wanted to record a depreciation expense, does it record it automatically as part of your closing process, or do you have to generate is it a manual journal entry, like you have to run a report and add everything up?
No, so if you remember, as we're looking at, or when we're setting up that actual that asset, right? We select a depreciation account. That's going to happen and be kept track of automatically. Now, is that something that you guys would be comfortable with it happening on its own, or is that something that you would want to maybe review and be something that you look over before it actually posts to the general ledger?
I think the latter.
Okay.
You'd want to look at it.
No, yeah, and that's totally understandable from what I've seen. It's automatic, but let me take a look and see if there's any settings where we could maybe disable the auto posting, and I can go ahead and shoot you guys an email and see if that's something that we can disable, okay?
Or adjust.
Can we adjust it? Because the problem is you probably have to go in and adjust the individual schedules, right? Because you want it to tie.
Let me set up. I want to pull up just.
Or even a quarterly or something. It's only CQ needs to be monthly, right? Quarterly or annually.
Let me take a look here at I'm going to open up just a notes section here and we'll take a look. I'll add that question in there and I'll see if that's something that we can maybe review versus having the system post. Let's take a look. Okay.
And can you turn that off?
That's what I'm going to have to double check. I don't know if there's an existing setting for that to disable it. But as with most things that auto posts in our system, there usually is. So I'm just going to double check with maybe with the product team upstairs, and then I'll get you an answer on that for sure.
Okay.
Okay. Alrighty, depreciation expense. Okay, and then I have the other note as far as depleting inventory. Okay. Now, as far as the asset tracking side of it goes, though, like I mentioned earlier, I'm going to make sure that we have asset tracking and the fixed assets enabled as of the go live date for you guys. I'll send an email out to Zach and I'll copy you guys on it, letting him know that that is something that you do want to have enabled, so that it's actually on when you go live. But from that point, again, all of the asset tracking stuff is going to be handled under the accounting and the PO section, and that's where we'll be able to go through, see a list of all of our items that we have on hand, whether that's fixed assets or inventory. So I do have a couple questions related to this that I'll have to email you after this call. But as far as the assets itself and the asset tracking, do you guys have any other questions concerning that? I think you guys have given me some pretty good ones so far. Alrighty. if there's, okay, so one other thing then that I wanted to show you guys here, Terry, that you had sent over in your list was voiding a check and understanding what happens kind of behind the scenes. Okay, so in this payable section, I'm sure you guys saw when Rachel and Jonathan came out, they might have showed you, you know, how to create an invoice and how to pay that off and all that stuff, right? Now, within the system, there's going to be what happens when we void a payment. You're going to see a couple different things, and there's some things that you got to be aware of when we do so. But this is what's going to happen. So if I go into the accounting payment section and I am searching, let me find some of my payments here. If there's a payment that I need to void from this section, what we'll do is we'll open up the payment itself and we'll be able to void that payment out. Real quick though, before we do that, GL wise, as far as what's happened, when the payment is made, we saw that reduction to payable and we saw a reduction to cash, right? When we void the payment out, all that's going to happen is we're going to do a reversal of that transaction, and you're going to see those items reversed out. So if I do save, we'll void the payment out. You'll notice that the payment is going to disappear. We're showing you only active payments. I can always come in and filter by voids, and we'll be able to open up that payment and see the void in this section. So you'll notice once we actually reverse the payment out, all we're going to do is just a reversal of the original transaction. We'll recredit accounts payable, and we'll do another debit to the cash account since the payment is being voided out. Now, when we
so if you're doing it, if you're voiding a check in a different period from when it's written, does it void the check only in the current period that you're in? So on the cash method, it doesn't go back and reverse it.
It's not going to do it from the original period. If you do try to do that, the system will give you an error, or not an error, but a warning or a notification letting you know that it's in a different period.
Okay.
Okay.
And then that invoice is now open again.
That is correct. So that is one thing that I did want to show you is the invoice now. So invoice number 1, if I were to open that invoice up, we now have an invoice with the original amount due of $35. At this point, it's now unpaid. You do have to go back in and process another payment. Now let's open up, for example, here it was. So invoice number 1, you'll notice on the very far right, amount 35, amount due, the full $35. So once we reverse the payment, that invoice is now unpaid. In order to reprocess this payment, this step kind of gets some people hung up a little bit. Once we reverse the payment out, not only is that marked unpaid, we need to come back into approve for payment to kick that invoice back over into the payment section so that it shows up for me to be able to process a payment for. So I'll go for approve for payment. We'll pull up invoice number 1. And I have a bunch in here, but it's one of the newer ones. So I'll select that invoice and I'll approve it for payment. And at that point, I can now come back to the payment section and process a payment for that invoice. Did you have a question?
Yeah, so what if the reason you're voiding it is you had a credit memo to reduce the amount of the invoice? How do you enter a credit memo and apply it to a specific invoice?
That's a great question, and I know that was one of the items on your list. So if that was the case, under accounting invoices, what we would do at that point is I would open up that invoices module, and under the new invoice section, what we're going to do is we'll be able to enter in. It's going to be like entering in a regular invoice. The only difference being that I'm going to, let me just select the vendor real quick. We'll add just some sort of invoice number in here. And the invoice total is going to be a negative amount, the amount of the credit that you're getting. Now we'll do all the same other stuff. We'll do a date, and we'll do just a due date here if we need to, but let's go ahead and set these details in here. I'm going to come down, select a property, I'm going to credit that account. Maybe it was some sort of material or something. We'll just do this account here. Now, now what we're going to do is we're going to want to match up that invoice total to the rate. So we'll do -20 so that it gives us a total that matches up. Once I do that, I'm going to save the invoice. And what you'll see at that point is along the top of this menu here, we're going to see, let me go ahead and refresh this page. Where did you go, credit memo? Oh, here we go. So I didn't actually post it yet. Once I post that invoice and it's posted to the GL, we're going to see this blue ribbon appear across the top. And that's going to give us this little hyperlink that we can click on to apply the credit to any unpaid invoice. So at this point, I can come in, select what vendor I have credits for in the system. That one was for Home Depot. I'll select the credit memo that has been added. It's going to show me the period that I want to post this to, which is defaults to the current period. And I'll be able to apply that to any unpaid invoices for that vendor. So I can apply the full 20. I can now apply that, and I can go back into my payment section and pay the remaining $15. Is that pretty straightforward?
Yep, that's great.
Perfect.
That's exactly what I was looking for.
Alrighty, perfect. So yeah, we'll be able to do it that way. As far as what happens when we void the check out, did that process make sense? Kind of where you have to go back to approve for payment again and things like that?
And then if we also need to reverse the invoice out, I saw that there was a reverse button.
Yep. If that is something that we need to do, we can go ahead and open up that invoice, and anything that's not posted, we can delete it out. Something that is already, for example, posted to the GL, I can come in here and I can first unapprove, and then from there, I'll be able to, let me pull up that invoice one more time. Refresh my page here. Where did we go? I think I might have missed it here. Anyways, once we unapprove, we'll be able to delete or reverse that invoice out of the system. So it will be available to you there in that section.
Now, if we're voiding a check that was posted against that invoice, the system's not going to allow us to delete the invoice, is it?
No. Now, there is, you said that you saw, for example, when one of these windows that I was looking at, you actually saw a reverse button. Is that what you saw?
Right. It was when you voided the check.
Right.
And then you went in and you hit the number 1, which was the invoice.
Right.
And it gave you the option. It said reverse on there.
Okay. So let me take a look, because now I see the ability to reverse the credit memo that I just applied to it. Let me take a look here. Find one of these other ones here. Let me find one, and I know what you're talking about, because so with these ones, one thing that we've got to take a look at. Thing is that I'm losing track of the. Okay, let me find one. I'll reverse it, and I won't lose track of the period that it's in. Let's find invoice number 321. Okay, so that right there, that reverse option that you're seeing, there's a difference between the reverse option and then the delete option that we're going to see. For any previous invoices, so any invoice from a prior period, other than the current period that we're in, we're going to be able to just reverse those out. If it's an invoice that is not posted to the GL in the current period, at that point, Entrata will allow us to actually do a hard delete of that invoice. So that's
once it's posted, you need to. Once it's posted, and let's say we ended up getting, I don't know, it didn't belong to us or something and got entered by mistake, you just have to reverse it out.
Correct.
Through a credit memo.
Correct.
And apply the payment to the credit memo to that invoice.
That is correct.
Does all of this stay in the vendor record. So if we went to look at the Home Depot vendor, we'd see that we wrote a check and that we voided it and then we applied a credit memo and then we wrote a final check. Would all of that be in the vendor history?
I know that it's going to be here within the invoice record itself, but let's open up Home Depot and let's take a look. So I'll see, I got the 2 purchase orders. I got my invoices. So yeah, we would be able to see all of that information in there. And so far, I don't have any payments for Home Depot. Now, let's take a look here, though. The only, and I think I actually, I spoke about this with, I know Jonathan, I think he had a similar question with these voided payments. Any voided payment is not going to be listed in that payment history for that vendor. We will see it tied to the original invoice, but we won't actually see it in the vendor record itself. Okay. Alrighty. Now, hey, one of the other things, Terry, that you had sent over in your list was setting up charge codes and creating GL accounts within the system. Have you, I know you guys are still on migration, so you probably haven't done this just yet, but under the setup and company section, you'll be able to do that on your end when the time comes. When you need to add any new accounts, create new charge codes, things like that, you'll be able to do so. Now under setup company, we're going to go to this financial section, and it's going to open up your general ledger and the GL tree. Now in this GL tree or the chart of accounts, we're going to open that up here and we'll see the 2 layouts. We'll see all the income statement accounts and we'll see all of the balance sheet accounts. To add or create a GL account, I can come in here and go to the specific section that I need to group that under and click on Add Account. And then from here, we'll be able to start filling out some of those details. So we'll need to enter in the account number, account name, obviously, and then GL account type. We'll want to make sure that we're selecting from this dropdown depending on the use. Now, I say depending, right, as far as what it's going to be used for. This GL account type drives where in Entrata you'll be able to use that specific account when you need it. So for example, if I am, now these accounts will always be available to you if you're doing like a manual journal entry and things like that. But if I'm setting up my asset tracking and I want all of the depreciation expense to be logged under a specific account that I've created, things like that, what we're going to be able to do, or what we'll need to do, is make sure that we're adding that in the correct section and selecting the specific type of GL account type within this dropdown. If you're ever trying to set something up and Entrata's asking you for a GL account type, maybe something like depreciation expense, and you don't see anything coming up, 99% of the time that GL account was added with a GL account type that doesn't fit the use or the section or the for what you're trying to use it for. So you'll come in here and you'll notice in this drop down we have a bunch of different things that we can select the GL account type. Try to select the best fit for what it is that you're actually setting up, and as long as you follow kind of that rule of thumb, you should be good. You'll be able to see these accounts in any specific sections in Entrata when you're trying to create a charge code, you're trying to set up the asset tracking, things like that. Now, what shows up in this dropdown is going to change depending on what section we're adding the actual account in. So if you were doing, for example, up top, we were talking about income accounts, but if I'm talking about expenses maybe, or things like that, we'll be able to see that the options that show up in the dropdown are going to be a little bit different. So if I come in here now we're talking about expenses, so we're going to see depreciation, bank fees, marketing expenses, other type of expenses here in this section. Now within the chart of accounts that we're looking at, creating the GL account is pretty straightforward. This also drives the reporting and what that looks like on your end when you go into the reports accounting section. So the layout that you see in here is what your actual income statement or your balance sheet is going to look like when you run the report. And one of the questions that I get is a lot of the times is somebody will come in here and they'll create an account and add it, under income, and it should have been under rent income or something like that. And now they're wondering why, their income statement is all screwed up and it doesn't look right, and the account is showing down here. Keep in mind that this does drive that layout. So if you need to come back in and make any changes, kind of change the layout around, you can reorder the tree, and I can pull up, for example, that income account, and I can say, you know what, this account that I accidentally added down under maybe rent income, that should go back down into my other income section. I can drag it down and we'll be able to save the layout there and reorder the GL tree. Now, you guys provided us a big old list of all of the, your chart of accounts that you want to use here at Entrata. But if you ever need to add any, you definitely can by coming into the GL tree. Now, knowing your management company, things like that, you guys are going to have a better idea of what it is that you'll need or what you'll be missing. Once we migrate, do you have a login yet, Terry? You or Shannon?
Oh, yeah, we both do.
Okay, so yeah. I would say maybe in the next couple of days, maybe on Monday or Tuesday, come in here, review that information, see if everything looks good, and then you can start making changes once you go live, adding accounts and things like that. Now,
yeah, we already signed off on all of it. Now,
perfect.
When you went into add account, it said limit GL usage. What is that function?
So the limit GL usage, let me pull up the assignable item fee. If we limit the GL account usage, it'll allow us to make it so that only certain properties can access this specific GL account. What's even better is with the release that I was talking about on the 17th, not only are we going to be, as of right now, the functionality is only to limit by property, but like I mentioned earlier, at that point in time, we'll be able to limit by, we'll be able to mark a GL account as restricted, and only users with permissions to restricted accounts will be able to see those. And those new settings will show up in this section here, just below limit GL account usage. You'll see restrict posting to GL account, and that's going to allow you to customize it that way as well. So not only will you be able to limit by property, but you'll be able to limit by specific users as well.
Wonderful, thank you.
Perfect. Alrighty. Now, apart from the GL account, one of the other things that involves some setup within Entrata are going to be all of the charge codes or the income codes that you'll be using within the system. Now, those are going to show up as well under this financial and general ledger section, but they'll be here in their charge code section. And within the charge codes, you're going to be able to set up what it is that we'll be able to use pricing wise within the system. Now, this charge code section, we're going to have a list of charge codes already created for you. But if you ever need to add something new that wasn't brought over in migration, now a couple weeks or a couple days down, live in the account, you see that you need something different, you can come in here and we can add a new charge code by clicking on this add charge code here on the right hand side. Now, from this section, from this window, we'll be able to select then the type of charge code that we are adding. Is this going to be a security deposit charge code? Is this some sort of expense or maybe other income, application fee, miscellaneous income, whatever it is that we're using, or whatever it is that we'll need. But we'll be able to add a name for this. So let's say I had maybe, I don't have an application fee that I have set up. So I can add that charge code. The associated ledger will always be resident. There's no other options in that dropdown. But under charge usage, this is where it could affect a little bit later on down the road when you're trying to set certain things up in the pricing. Now, charge usage is important because it's going to let us know where in the pricing module we're going to be using this specific charge code. Since this is in just a miscellaneous income fee, It doesn't necessarily fall under an amenity. It's not a pet fee necessarily, anything like that. What I would leave the charge usage at would be base. And then I'm going to come down to charge timing, and I'm going to select a specific timing in this dropdown. So if this is an application fee, I'm going to charge this during the application process. I'll come down to the application timing and I'll select that. But you'll notice that we have quite a few other timings in this list that you can set up. Now, if this were maybe not an application fee, but maybe this was like a return check fee, I can go ahead and select return item fee. If this was, for example, somebody terminated their lease early or they gave insufficient notice, we can go ahead and select the timing for that. And these timings are going to allow the system to automatically charge this this specific fee if you know that criteria is met. So if I have my settings set up to allow for maybe 60 days notice, you have to give me 60 days, but you don't, then the system knows if we set it up. Obviously, it's not just, you don't just set up the charge code and it does it automatically, but if we have this charge code selected in our pricing to say use this charge code when somebody doesn't give me sufficient notice, this is what we'll use, and we'll go ahead and post that to that residence ledger as an insufficient notice fee or a late fee or anything like that. Now, once we select our timing, we're going to come down to the display to occupant task. So we'll go ahead and if we want to change, make it a little bit different from what we actually set up in the name, we can. Generally though, I see just the same, just application fee. And down in the GL account section, we'll actually start to, or we'll actually be able to select the accounts that this is going to hit when this charge posts. So we'll select our debit account, and generally with this income, we'll see the accounts receivable account selected in here, and then we'll select the appropriate income GL account from this dropdown. So we'll say maybe application fees. Now down here in these settings, as far as going into the details of it, we'll be able to select if we were maybe to write off any unpaid charges on our residence ledger, we can write this charge code off to itself so that the write-off happens to this application fees account. If I want to maybe do it to bad debt, I can from this dropdown. But generally, I think the best practice, what our consulting team recommends, is going to be rent should be written off to bad debt, and then everything else is just written off to itself. So you can select whatever you want from that dropdown depending on what your policy is. If I want to set a default amount for this charge code, I can, so that whenever somebody selects it, maybe a property manager or an assistant manager from the dropdown, if they select the application fee, it'll automatically populate $25 if that's something that I have set in this section. Now, if I want to allow them to overwrite the amount, I can disable that here. I can require notes if they're editing the charges on the ledger. I can waive late fees on specific charge codes. You have a couple different options here in this section. So I know maybe eventually you'll have something that you'll need to set up that's not showing up in the correct section, or you just don't have a charge code for it. This is where you would be able to add that information. Now, as far as the setup of the charge code goes, do you guys have any questions for me concerning that section or how to add a charge code?
Can you go back to that screen that you were on? Because there were some other fields I want to talk about.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Just scroll down, I think.
Advanced?
Yeah, that's what you want to look at. This is one of the things we want to talk about, hide residence from charges, hide credit. So here, have you heard about our concession or dilemma?
I haven't, no. What's going on?
Okay, so here's what we do. Not on Abbott on the first property we're onboarding because that's multifamily, but on our student housing property, what we do is time of leasing, we sometimes offer a gift card.
Okay.
But the gift card is committed to it when they sign the lease, but we don't actually give out the gift cards until after they've moved in. That way we're not giving out cards for people that never show up because it's real money, right?
Yeah.
And it's only like 6 to 9 months out.
Yeah, it can be 6 to 9 months out. So what we want to do is to do two things. One, track our gift card liability and the expense in the period in which it's been promised.
Okay.
We want to connect that gift card liability to the tenant ledger. But we don't want to reduce the tenant ledger's receivable balance by amount of a gift card. So Shannon came up, she's our brain trust over here, was another great idea about sort of doing a charge code to record it and then a charge code that reverses it all off the tenant ledger.
Okay.
And she was trying to set this up in the demo to get it to work, to see if we could follow it through and get it to work, but I think it didn't work, and we never knew why.
Yeah, I set up the charge code, I set up the DL account, but then when I went to actually try to use it, it wasn't there to choose from.
And I'm wondering if it was because of that timing.
It's either going to be the charge usage or it's going to be the charge timing. Honestly, if it's not showing up, it's one of those two items. Now, you said you have that. You tried setting that up in your test account, Shannon?
Yeah, that's what we tried to do.
Yeah,
why don't we do this? I'll go into the test account and we'll take a look at it. I can take a look at it maybe this afternoon or early on Monday, and we'll play around with it and see what we can do to make it work. I have seen, now let me give you a little bit of background. There are some options when it comes to like specials and things like that, where instead of some sort of concession up front or over the life of the lease, we do just like a gift incentive, right? We do have the option to set up specials that way, but I've actually never set one up myself, because generally what I've seen done is a dollar amount up front. There is some functionality that is available. Let's take a look at it. Let me pull up the demo account after this call. I can play around with it a little bit, and we can do a follow-up call to see what we can do to make it work. Does that work?
That would be great.
Perfect.
That would be great.
Let me make a note of that so that I don't forget. So in the ILM demo account, gift card.
So if we needed to add a timing item, it would be like concessions at leasing or something.
Yeah. Now, generally,
how does that get loaded into the system? Is that something you guys do, or is that something we do on that charge timing category?
That would be something. So the options that are in this section are hard coded into it, because there's architectural requirements and things on the back end. But what I think that you guys would need to do, it would be. There would be a couple things. While I do think that it's the charge usage and the timing, I think that the charge usage needs to be special type. Is that what you had selected?
I don't remember.
Okay, so I think it'll have to be charge timing with a general use, or with a charge usage of special with a charge timing of lease approval. And the code type might come into play where we need to maybe do some sort of expense to the property. I'm not sure. We'll have to play around with it a little bit, but it's gonna.
Where it hits in our financial statements is in the vacancy in the vacancy group. So
it did.
Yeah, that's where we want it to post. We want gift cards to post up above, like with model vacancy and employee units. Gift card concessions goes up there. So
okay.
It's an incentive to get the rent. So I don't know if that's also messing around with it.
It's possible, but at that point, if we have the GL account set up in the section on the income statement, then I don't, or on the balance sheet, I don't necessarily think that would mess with it. I think it all has to do with the charge code setup and how we're tying that charge code to the actual special setup within Entrata. So there could be two pieces there. We'll have to dig around a little bit and play around.
All right.
Okay.
George, if you can help us solve this, Shannon and I will buy you lunch.
Well, hey, if you're taking me to lunch, then I'm going to put in some overtime to make sure we get it fixed, all right? All righty. Now, so I'll make a note of that. I've made a note of it, actually. I'll go into the demo account just to make sure that I'm looking at the right one. Let me make sure that this is the account that you're talking about. Is it the... Let's take a look here. It's thinking.
I don't know what I have.
I'll tell you. It's 12750.
Okay, yeah. So if it has a number after the name, then that's the one. Okay, perfect. So I'll take a look at that setup in there. And what was the name of the charge code by chance that you set up?
Gift card concession, I believe.
Gift card concession, okay. That way I know what to look at, and we'll take a look at the setup. But the goal is to record the liability, or record the what's due to the resident, but not necessarily have it reduce the receivable, right?
Correct.
Okay.
So what we want to do is book it. So here's what we want to ultimately be able to do. We want to be able to like track our liability each month and recognize the expense. And then when it's time to order gift cards, we want to be able to run a report that for those gift cards that were posted to the resident ledgers,
okay,
even though it was reversed out, so that we can see who we owe gift cards to.
Oh, okay, okay.
So because right now what's happening is somebody is keeping an off the system Excel schedule, and it's a disaster.
Yeah.
And the lists aren't the same. You can't audit them. It's a nightmare. And so this is a lot of money. I mean, one of our properties will get $200,000 out.
Oh my gosh, yeah, no, that's a lot of money.
I know, it's serious, serious money. So we want a better way to track it.
Okay.
The other idea that.
Yeah, go ahead.
So the other idea, Lynn, I think we were thinking about was maybe if that doesn't work, maybe using the inventory module somehow.
Okay. Yeah, no, I think.
But that would be a last resort. My preference is that it's tied to the tenant.
I'll be honest with you. I think that I'm pretty certain that this is something we can do through charge code setup. We just have to make sure that we get these usage and timings correct, and I'm pretty sure we'll be able to figure something out. All right.
Okay.
I have general use as the timing.
Okay. I don't think that the general use is going to be what you want. I feel like this is more of a special use, since it's more of a special or a leasing special. So I think that's one of the items, but we'll have to play around a little bit and find what it is. I'll spend some time on this after we jump off the call, and we'll make sure that I take a look at that. Okay.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah.
Alrighty, guys.
Thank you, George.
Yeah, for sure. Now,
Sorry.
No, yeah, Gio. One last thing that I wanted to then go over that was on this list here, Terry, that you sent over, was entering budgets within the system. Now, the budget functionality is available under the reports, or actually under the accounting and budget section. And within that section, we'll be able to upload a working budget, and then we'll be able to make a current budget to use for reporting purposes, to compare budget versus actual and things like that. Now, we have two options in this section. The slow way would be to do a new budget. We could select the property that we're creating the budget for. And if I come in here and say this is for, since I already have a budget in there, but if I said this is maybe for, I'm already working on 2017 or whatever, I'll select the start and the end period for this budget. I can start with a blank one, or I can use actuals from the previous year if I want to. Now, whichever route you go, let's just go ahead and start with a blank one here. But if I create the budget and actually add a name, when I create that here, it's going to generate a list of all of the accounts that we have within the system, and I'll be able to open up that working budget, and I'll be able to see each specific section, but I now have to go in by column and by cell, and I have to either enter in that information manually, or I can enter in a total. For example, let's say this was for 12,000, and I can split it up over all of the months, or I can split it up quarterly if I wanted to. Now, that really is going to be the slower way. The best way, and I know that you guys probably handle some of the budgeting and the planning already through an Excel spreadsheet. You probably already have some sort of template or sample. I would actually just import the working budget. That's what I would recommend. If we open that up, in this pop-up window that comes up, we'll be able to see some formatting, some templates that we provide that needs to match up, or else you're going to get all sorts of errors when you try to import that file. But if you download the format and you download the PDF with some of the sample data and what it should look like, you'll be able to quickly open up that CSV. If you have an existing budget already, we can transfer over the information and the data into this section, and just without having to manually go in and type in amount for all of these periods, I can just do that in Excel, run whatever formulas I need to, import the file into the system, and it'll create that working budget for me automatically. There's a couple things that you got to keep in mind when you're doing it this way. One of those is that the property name needs to match exactly as we have it in the system. So in Entrata, we need to match that up. The other thing that's really important is that the formatting of the GL accounts is exactly as we have it within the GL tree or the chart of accounts. So I need to come in here and I need to make sure that my formatting, if I were to import this file, is going to be using an 8-digit account number like I have here within the GL tree. So I would need to make sure that those numbers match up exactly, or else I'm going to get an error. If I try to upload something like this, it's going to give me an error that the formatting is incorrect. Everything else though, you can just drop your data in and you'll be able to upload that information fairly quickly into the budget section. We'll have the working budget now within this tab. And from here, once I've finalized, once I've reviewed the budget, once 2017 rolls around, I can open up the budget, and in the top right, you'll be able to see this post budget button. If I post the budget, at that point, that becomes my current budget, and I can now see that within the reporting module, and that's what Entrata is going to use to run comparisons and things like that. So just keep that in mind.
Can you have multiple budgets for a property? In other words, can you have sort of like your underwriting budget and then your operating budget and run reports to compare against either both budgets in one report or in separate reports?
Yeah, so that's actually a great question, and the answer is yes. So I can have, for example, like the working budget, and I can have the current budget, like the operating budget for that same period. And when I go into the reporting section, for example, let's go to reports and accounting, I've seen the ability to select a working budget versus the current budget in the system. So if I was doing like income statement budget versus actual, I can now come in here and I can select, let me take a look here for Alpha Apartments. I can select from this budget status dropdown, I can select maybe like the working one, and compare that and run the report using that specific budget instead of the current budget for that property, or what you call the operating budget. So you can run reports both ways. What was that?
That's beautiful. Can you put your own names in there? So instead of current and operating, can we have underwriting and operating?
Unfortunately, those labels aren't customizable. You just have to kind of keep a mental note that that's what the difference is.
So we'll have to make.
But I think you can name this.
Mm-hmm.
Like the budget status we can't change, but we can name each of our budgets whatever we want.
Oh yeah, you can. The budget name can be whatever you want. It's just the what do you call it? Just the status dropdown can't be changed. Nope.
Okay.
Okay. Alrighty. Now, as like I said, I would recommend going through and doing that.
Can I ask one more question on budget?
Yeah.
Sorry,
Yeah.
one more question on budget, and only because we're going to probably be doing this. So we had sent a budget as part of our migration for Abbotts Run, but it's based on our underwriting model. And Shannon and I learned this morning that budget might be tweaked a little bit and made a little bit tighter for operations.
Okay.
So once the budget's in there, can we copy it over to, say, the working budget and then go in and edit specific fields so we don't have to completely redo everything?
You definitely can. So if I assume that's going to be uploaded into Entrata as part of the, and it's going to be made the current budget, so whatever you provided. Now, if that's something that we don't want, you'll notice here on the right-hand side, I can archive. And what that's going to do is it'll remove it from the current tab. I can come back into this archive section. I can open up the budget and I can unarchive that. Now what that's going to do for me is it's going to put that budget back in that working section where I can now tweak it and make any changes to it and then post it again to reflect those changes.
So will the original archive still be in the archive folder?
No, so we'll go ahead. No, so we moved it from current, right? We archived it, that puts it in the archive tab. What I did was I archived it, and then that put it back in the working tab where I can now make any changes to it and then repost it, or if I need to.
So we actually want to copy it and have that version and then change it a little bit and have a second version.
Oh, perfect. So if that's the case, then instead of just editing out the one that we unarchived and posting it, I would copy the budget, rename it, and then post the one that we edit out. And you would still have the working one, the underwriting one in the working tab.
Wow, that's great.
I'm glad that you guys are excited about it. I'm glad that you're excited.
I'm so glad we've had this session with you.
So let me ask you this.
Yeah.
Can we go back and put, for our other properties we're going to be onboarding later on, can I go back and put in like previous year's budgets and sort of just as an archive?
Yeah, so I've seen that done. Now I can come in here, for example, into the working section. And if I were to do maybe, if I were to import or if I were to create a new budget, in this dropdown, we allow you to go back. We limit it to like 4 years of previous activity. So you can go back to 2012 and add that if you wanted to.
Now, what about like prior data? So like what if we wanted to do like a this year, last year, report? Can we like put in like prior year data?
That's a great question. And I would say that the answer to that would be no, because a lot of that information leading up to the migration, you guys provide trial balances, things like that. I would say it might start to conflict with some of the migration items. I would feel more comfortable if you asked that question probably to Zach or maybe Sarah.
Okay.
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 All right. I'm going to say no, but they might tell you something different.
Okay.
Alrighty. Now, as far as the budget goes, do you guys have any other questions for me?
Nope.
Alrighty, guys. Now, what was that?
I was just asking Shane a question.
Oh,
go ahead.
No worries. So one other thing that I had here for me, the last and final thing on your list, Terry, was the closings for the property. Now, within Entrata, and I don't know if this is something that you saw with Jonathan and Rachel when they came out, but closing the period within Entrata is done under the accounting and closing section. Now, within this section, you're going to see that the period is kind of split up into 3 different sections. We have accounts receivable, we have the AP module, and then we have the general ledger. Now, when we go in to close the period, by default, there usually aren't any specific closing tasks that are required to be completed, but you have the ability to customize that list if you need to. Now, for example, let's go into close a period for one of my properties. I'm going to click on the close period button on the left-hand side, and I am going to close, what's the last open period? I'm going to do December of 2015 for Alpha Apartments. I'm going to load the property. And you'll notice that for me to close the period, it doesn't require anything of me. Now, you guys probably have some sort of policies in place. You guys probably run reporting. You make sure that all of the move-ins are performed, things like that, right? And if that's something that you guys want to enable, you definitely can by going into the setup and company section. Under this financial tab, under closings, we have a list of closing tasks that you can enable and require for each of these specific modules. So if I need to make sure that all of the move-ins are processed before the closing is performed for the period, as far as the accounts receivable goes, what's going to happen is I'm going to see this enabled. I'm going to do this, and I'm going to require this to lock the period. I'm going to be able to come back in here, and when I load this property, Entrata is going to make sure that any move-ins that should have been processed in the month of December, or the period that I'm trying to close, it's going to make sure that those are actually performed before it allows us to continue. So I can come in here now, and I can click on this number 27, and Entrada is going to give me an entire list of all of the residents that need to be moved in, I can click through to the profile and I can perform the move-in from this section and start clearing these out so that that section under the closings, instead of being read and giving me that warning message, it starts getting cleared out. Once all of the move-ins are performed, and you probably would never see 27, hopefully, at a property, but this is a test account. Once all of these are performed, it will show 0, it'll go green, and you'll have a little check mark next to that requirement. Did you guys discuss these closing tasks during the consultation to see if that's something that you wanted us to enable for you automatically?
I don't recall.
Okay. So if that is something that maybe you didn't do during consultation, or you want to come back in and enable, I would recommend coming into that setup company section and taking a look at what's available there in that list, and kind of start playing around with some of the requirements and finding what matches up to your closing processes, so that you can require these items when you're trying to close the period within Entrada. Now, as far as specific, the specific closing tasks, not every single one is going to actually validate within the system. So not every requirement will check to make sure that there are certain action items that have to be processed and things like that. Some of them are just going to be general, like reminders and things like that you'll be able to add to the list, so that whoever is performing the closing kind of has a checklist to go through before they close the period. But things like move-ins, move-outs, stuff like that, those will be something that Entrada validates and makes sure that that the action has been performed within the system.
Now, one thing that we did discuss, I believe, in training was where it would do like an automatic close.
Okay.
Where it would move the current month forward, but it wouldn't close it.
That's
where it was still open, where
right.
Whatever's automatically entered by like the site or something is going to go to the current month.
Correct.
But then where we would still be able to step back and review the prior month before locking it and closing it.
That is a great question, and that is probably something that was brought up. Now, that is actually something that is handled at the property level, and by default, that is what we recommend. So we'll have Entrada automatically roll over the period, and what's going to happen is most of your users, all your site level staff, will never have permissions to post in any prior period. So they'll always post in the current period, but you'll be able to come through, review, and make any changes being an administrator. Now, what's going to happen is if that is something that we want to make sure is set up, I can double check under financial closings. And in this post-month section, we'll want to make sure that the following settings are set to yes. And it looks like for Abbott's Run, is this the first property we're bringing over?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so for Abbott's Run, it looks like we do have those 3 enabled. And so what's going to happen is on the 31st of the month, once you go live, March 31st, the period will automatically roll over into April 2016. But you as administrators, you'll always have the ability to go back in, review, make any adjustments in a prior period. Your site staff will not, though. Generally, the permissions are set up that way.
Okay.
Alrighty, guys. Well, as far as the list that you had sent me, Terry, I think we covered just about everything. I do have some notes left over concerning the gift card incentive that I'm hoping I can solve, because I do want a nice steak dinner from you guys. And then we have, I'm just kidding, I'll do it for free. But we also have the
No, I'm serious. You figure this out. I'll send you an American Express gift card. No having wrong me.
Alrighty. And then we have the inventory question that I was going to look into for you guys as far as depleting inventory. And then we have the other question that was left over, which was disabling the auto posting of depreciation expense. I'll get some more details for you guys over the next couple of days. I'll do some research. I'll ask around and get some additional input. And then I will email you guys back or jump on a call, give you a call. We can jump on another webinar to discuss those items. But I'll make sure to follow up with you guys and we'll get these questions answered, okay?
All right, that's great. Can I ask you one other question that wasn't on my list? But if you need to go, I understand.
No. Go ahead.
Okay, so we're in the dark period, and we just got, I don't know, 100 checks that we're going to deposit, and then the property's going to enter them into the system. Is there anything special we need to know about that or do anything?
No.
Do we have to manually go in because it'll hit the receivable, but because the checks aren't going through the Entrata system, right, they're going to be direct deposited into our account. So we need to go in and manually move the money. I mean, how does that work?
That's a great question. Now, I do have a question for you. Do you guys, or will you be using the check scanning functionality?
We will, and then, yes, I have a scanner. It's coming. It's there, but it's not set up yet.
Not
so
set
in
up
the meantime,
yet? Okay.
We have $115,000 that we're not going to let sit in a drawer. We're going to deposit.
Right. And that's fine. So what we're going to do is we'll have you guys record all of those payments in bulk. Let me pull something up here for you. We'll do, essentially, we're going to post those to the resident ledgers by going to residents and payments. And in the top left, you're going to see this bulk enter payments section. Now, we're going to go in here. And Entrata's going to ask you a couple things. We're going to ask you the number of payments that you're entering, the total of all of the payments, and then we're going to ask you for a payment post date and then a payment post month. Now, you'll notice down here at the bottom, I know that you guys you're going to go and take those to the bank and actually physically deposit them. So in order to update the cash account within Entrata, we'll want to make sure that when we record the payments, we're actually creating the deposit at the same time. You don't have to. You can always come back and create the deposit at a later point, but this feature just makes it easier. You just do it all in one, and it'll be done. Now, when you come in here, you want to make sure that you select, obviously, the correct bank account, the deposit post date and post month, and then we'll be able to proceed. And on the back end, or when we're actually recording these items, let me just fill in some of these details in here really quick. We'll make sure that we're on the back end, we'll add all of these details as far as payments, dates, and deposits and stuff. And when we click proceed, now we'll be able to look for a resident, search by apartment number or name, type in the payment amount, things like that. But as long as you do that and you create the deposit up front, the financial stuff will be squared away. You can take the checks to the bank and deposit them physically, because that's a lot of money to have hanging around in a drawer. So you can definitely do that.
Great.
Thank
you very much. You rock. Yes.
Thank you. So I'll go ahead and I'll investigate those items. Then I'll reach back out to either you, Terry, or Shannon, or a group email or a call, and then we'll get those items straightened out as well. Okay.
That's wonderful.
Perfect. I hope you guys
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. I hope you guys have a good weekend. And I'll be talking to you guys hopefully early next week. Okay.
I'll tell you what, it's going to be a much better weekend now having had this call with you, because Shannon and I are supposed to run this thing. We don't know what we're doing.
No,
so
hey,
I feel a lot better.
I'm glad that you guys feel good about it. I know it seems kind of scary, but I think, with just a little bit of going in there and trying it out, I think everything is going to be okay.
Are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
I was afraid I disconnected you.
No.
We have one other thing that we need to do, but we probably need to do it on another call, and that is how it works with the AP processing service.
Okay.
We're still not clear on all that, so I think Zach's going to set up another call. Okay.
Yeah, no, I agree, and that actually, I do remember, it wasn't on the sheet, and I forgot about it, Terry, but I did actually have that discussion with Rachel and Jonathan, and they did mention that you guys had asked about the invoice processing, right, where you send that information to Entrata, and then we enter all of the payables for you. Let me, I didn't get any additional info before this call from Jonathan. I don't know if he was able to figure something out, but that is a service that we provide. Let me double check. I'll get some additional details. I'll add that to my list, and I will reach back out next week with some additional information. Okay. I know
we have.
What was that?
We did sign up for it. We just don't know what we're getting and how it works.
Okay.
Yeah, and I believe Sarah is the one that is going to be handling that. I'm not I think I'd already brought that up, and she said that she was handling it. But if you could verify, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, no, I will. I'll follow up with Sarah. I'll verify on my end as well, and we'll make sure that we get you the info that you guys need.
Great.
Alrighty, guys. Well, hey, I hope you guys have a good one. You're very welcome. I'll talk to you guys next week.
All right. Thank you.
Have a good one.
Have a great weekend.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.